चलेगा. Let's try it. Okay, so today we are going to learn about synapses. Alright, synapses are the places where either two neurons meet, okay, or a neuron and an effector cell meets. Alright, effector cell, when I say effector cell, it can be a muscle cell or a gland cell to which the neuron is stimulating. If it's a muscle cell, it is stimulating the muscle to either contract or relax. If it's a gland cell, the neuron is either stimulating it to secrete certain kind of hormone or to stop secreting certain kind of hormone. Both, right? Inhibitory and stimulatory effects. So the synapse is a region where, as I said, two neurons or a neuron and an effector cell meet. Alright. In most of the cases, the effector cells are your muscular tissues. Alright. And when a neuron forms a synapse with a muscular tissue, it's called a neuromuscular junction. Okay. But we will talk about neuromuscular junction when you are talking about the muscle tissues. Alright. Today we will talk about the synapse between two neurons. Alright. As we know, the neuron is made up of three basic parts, right? Cell body, dendrites, axon, and then there are axon terminals with synaptic bulbs. Okay. In most of the cases, not all, but in most of the cases, when a neuron is interacting with another neuron, alright, let's say this is another neuron. The synapse is mostly formed between the axon terminals and the dendrites of the next neuron. Alright. This whole region is called the synapse. The neuron which is present before the synapse, matlab the axons of the neuron, that is called your presynaptic neuron. So this will be your presynaptic neuron. Pre, something which comes before. It is coming before the synapse, and its axon terminals are forming the synapse with the dendrites of the next neuron. Alright. So that neuron is called your presynaptic neuron. Okay. And the neuron which comes after the synapse is called your postsynaptic neuron. Alright. Is that agreed? Yeah. Can you pause it? Okay, so the presynaptic neuron, postsynaptic neuron, and the synapse. Alright. If you zoom the structure, the exact place where the synapse is being formed, alright. So this is the axon terminal, right? Axon terminals end in synaptic bulbs or varicosities. Here we have taken an example of a synaptic end bulb, alright. And this is a part of the dendrite of the postsynaptic neuron, right? They never meet, remember. The plasma membranes of these two will never actually meet each other. There is always a small space between them. That space is called the synaptic cleft. Okay. Now, synapses are of two types. One is an electrical synapse and one is a chemical synapse. This is an example of a chemical synapse. If you talk about electrical synapses, what happens is, okay, there are various ways in which inside your body two cells can meet. Alright, they can form tight junctions. We have studied tight junctions before. Alright, there are many other kind of junctions. One of the junctions is your gap junctions. Alright, So this is a part of the plasma membrane of one cell, a part of the plasma membrane of the second cell. They actually never meet each other, but there are these channels, right, called the connexins made up of connexons made up of the connexin proteins, right. These are connexons. Consider them nothing but simple pipes, right, pipes which will allow the flow of fluid from one cell to another, whatever it is, cytoplasm, ions, other stuff, that are your connexons. Okay, in case of an electrical synapse, alright, there is a presynaptic neuron, postsynaptic neuron which are meeting at the synapse. At an electrical synapse, these connexons are present. Okay, so what is happening, we did this yesterday, when the action potential is being moved, right, when there is flow of ions from inside to the outside or the outside to the inside of the plasma membrane, it's mainly the ions. So when a signal is to be given from one neuron to another through an electrical synapse, those ions will simply pass through these connexons, alright, and then they move out or move in depending on which ion is it, but they move through these connexons, right. So it is as good as saying that the two cells are connected to each other. This is called an electrical synapse, alright. The time taken for a signal to pass through the electrical synapse is very fast. Is very fast compared to your chemical synapse, which we'll do now. Is this understood? Okay. Alright. In case of your chemical synapse, what happens is, your synaptic end bulbs have vesicles, right. What are vesicles? Vesicles are spheres, membrane bound spheres in which certain chemicals are stored. In case of a chemical synapse, the chemical inside your vesicles will be a neurotransmitter, alright. Let's take an example that the neurotransmitter is acetylcholine, alright. It can be any neurotransmitter. There are approximately 100 different neurotransmitters which can be present. We'll discuss the neurotransmitters later, alright. So the neurotransmitters are present in vesicles, and vesicles are bound by a certain membrane. What will happen is, these vesicles membrane will combine with the membrane of the synaptic end bulb, and the contents of it can come out, right. But for this to happen, what happens is, the intracellular amount of calcium ion should be high, alright. And normally in the end bulbs, the amount of calcium inside the intracellular, inside the cell, inside the cytoplasm is less, is very less. Okay. So supposedly a nerve impulse is traveling, an action potential is traveling. You know what happens during action potential? There is change in the potential of the membrane, right? Remember we did it yesterday. From resting potential, which is let's say it's approximately -70, it becomes positive, then it reaches a threshold -55, goes up to +30, right, and then falls back again, -55, then -70, goes a little below -90, and then again comes back to your resting potential. So, and we know that these nerve impulses are passing along the axon, right. One set of your ion channel stimulates the next, alright. When that is going on, what will happen is the nerve impulse will finally reach the synaptic end bulb, alright, and the change in the voltage in this region will cause the voltage gated channels of calcium to be opened, right. Before we did the voltage gated sodium channels, voltage gated potassium channels. These are examples of voltage gated calcium channels. Okay, And as already said, the amount of calcium outside the cell is more than the inside the cell. Alright, that is your chemical gradient, and obviously calcium is positively charged, the interior is more negative, so that is your electrical gradient also. So because of the electrochemical gradient, the calcium will move inside rapidly. The movement of calcium inside the synaptic end bulb will cause these vesicles to come near the membrane, alright, near the membrane which is lining the synaptic cleft, come near this membrane and fuse with it. Fusion will cause the neurotransmitter inside to come out in the synaptic cleft. Alright, the distance is very small and these neurotransmitters can diffuse through it very rapidly. So they'll immediately come, and in your postsynaptic neuron, in the membrane near the synaptical cleft, there are receptors present. Alright, these are also gated channels, but these are the other type of gated channels. These are your ligand gated channels. That is, they will allow the passage of cations, anions, whatever it is, only when the ligand binds. Alright, in this case your neurotransmitter is the one which acts as the ligand. Because it was liberated in the synaptical cleft, it will come and bind to the gated channels. The binding of the neurotransmitter will cause the channels to open. Alright, and depending on what kind of ligand gated channel it is, okay, supposingly in most of the cases, you want the nerve impulse to flow further from the synapse to the cell body axon of the postsynaptic neuron. So in most of the cases this will be your sodium gated channel, ligand gated sodium channels. So it will open upon the binding of the ligand and your sodium will flow inside rapidly. What happens when sodium flows inside? Again, there is a change in the membrane potential, resting membrane potential, and there will be potentials created over here. But remember, always, whether it's a chemical synapse or an electrical synapse, the initial near the synapse region in the postsynaptic neuron, the initial potential which is generated is always graded potential. Right?
Yeah.
If the graded potential reaches the threshold, then another nerve impulse will start in the axon. Remember, somewhere here your graded potentials are being generated. These will flow till your trigger zone. This is the trigger zone. Remember, if it reaches the threshold, then again the nerve impulse will be generated and it will flow through your axon. Okay, is this understood? Clear? And also an important thing, once these neurotransmitters function is over, alright, if they remain attached to the channel, it will remain open forever. Alright, and maybe if another impulse is coming, another signal is coming, it will remain on forever. Okay, you want it to go back to its phase before, the resting phase. So you need the ligands to come out. Alright, ligands which are attached have to be removed from the receptors. After their work is done, they have to be removed, right? These ligands can be removed by a few different processes. Either they can simply diffuse off from the synaptical cleft, they can diffuse in the postsynaptic thing or your neuroglial cells surrounding it, alright, or there is an uptake. Reuptake means it again enters your presynaptic neuron and becomes vesicles. Okay, for that there are certain proteins present in the plasma membrane of your presynaptic neuron. Okay, they'll just simply go up. It is called reuptake. Uptake is when they have initially formed, reuptake. Alright, or there can be an uptake in the neighboring cells. There is your neuroglial cells. In most of the cases, this is one of the important functions of the glial cells, that these neurotransmitter is uptaken by your neuroglial cells, processed and then given back to your presynaptic cells so that they can make vesicles again. Okay, these causes reusability of the synapse. Alright, is this thing understood till now? Sure? Okay, so now we're going to talk about cDNA libraries. Okay, what are cDNA libraries and how they can be used? Okay, so first you should know what is a cDNA, right? We have the DNA, a gene. RNA polymerase is the enzyme which will transcribe on the gene and give you an RNA, right? There is an enzyme which is found in retroviruses. Alright, it is called your reverse transcriptase enzyme. This is the only enzyme which has the ability to form DNA from RNA. Right, we've done this. DNA from RNA. So if it is forming DNA, it is a type of DNA polymerase only. Right, and as a rule all DNA polymerases require a primer. Okay, if it's a eukaryotic mRNA, we know there is a poly A tail present, right? So mostly these primers which are made, they come and bind, they are poly T primers which can come and bind to this poly A region. Then they give the free 3' end, using which the reverse transcriptase will form the DNA fragment. This DNA is complementary to the RNA, right? That is why it is given the name cDNA. Okay, this is just one fragment form. You want a DNA double helix, right? You don't want a duplex of the cDNA. So then what can happen is, if you let reverse transcriptase only do this, it will degrade this RNA, and then it will, using this strand, it will form the second strand to give you the two complementary strands of cDNA. But processivity of reverse transcriptase is less. Okay, that is why mostly what we do is, once you get one strand of cDNA, you remove your reverse transcriptase, use RNase H, okay, which will degrade the RNA part, and then you use the normal DNA polymerase, okay, isolated from organisms, and that will form the second fragment. Because why you prefer, अगर DNA से DNA बनाना है, you prefer DNA polymerase than reverse transcriptase, because DNA polymerase का processivity is good, मतलब the speed is good, the amount of errors created is less because proofreading can be done. Reverse transcriptase, you know the fact that we say HIV virus, we know it mutates a lot, right? And that mutation is actually helpful for the virus, because whenever you try and make a retroviral drug against the virus, by the time you make the drug and you target a particular part of the virus, it is already mutated. Alright, from where does that mutation come? The main reason, one of the main reasons for that mutation is a reverse transcriptase. Okay, whenever reverse transcriptase is doing its work after an HIV virus infection, okay, the new viron particles which are there, most of them are highly mutated, because your reverse transcriptase, when it is copying, right, when it is making the complementary A, T, G, C, इसका complementary क्या रहेगा, T, A, C, G, इसके अंदर बीच में बहुत सारी मिस्टेक्स करेगा, G के अगेंस्ट C डालने के बदले A डाल देगा, T डाल देगा. It can make many of such mistakes, alright, and not corrected also, so they will remain. You will say in ideal conditions these mistakes, mutations will be harmful, right? But if it happens in most of the organisms, it will be harmful. But in viruses, this is the same mistakes made by the reverse transcriptase which helps the viruses to mutate at a larger rate, and that mutation actually causes the change in structures, and every time you bring a drug, by the time you bring a drug, the structure of the protein of the viron has changed. Alright, that is the normal function of reverse transcriptase in retroviruses, but in biotechnology, in recombinant DNA technology, especially in other applications of biotechnology, like when you want to make a cDNA library, what you do is you isolate this reverse transcriptase from the viruses. You don't actually isolate the protein, you isolate the DNA which is coding for reverse transcriptase, put it in bacteria and then express it to get proteins, reverse transcriptase proteins. Those enzymes then are used in making cDNA libraries. So the first step in making cDNA libraries is, the very first step in making cDNA library is, if you want to make a cDNA library of, let's say, the hepatocytes, okay, hepatocytes ka cells you will take, from that you will isolate the mRNA, okay, all that mRNA, after purifying it, then you will put the reverse transcriptase, and by this process your reverse transcriptase will give you cDNA copies, many cDNA copies. Alright, at a particular time hepatocytes will express some genes but not all the genes. Remember, hepatocytes are specialized structures. If your genome, it has 30,000 genes, okay? It's not necessary all of them are being expressed by the hepatocytes at a particular time. पहले तो differentiated cells में there are specific genes which are being expressed, like in the hepatocytes only, let's say 10,000 of these genes will be expressed. So if there are 30,000 different genes, alright, in your hepatocytes only a few of them will be expressed, alright, and it's dependent on the time also. At a particular time more might be expressed, let's say about 12,000, or less, let's say by 9,000, but all of it will never be expressed, alright, few of the genes will be expressed. Express मतलब उसी का mRNA बनेगा, ठीक है? So at a particular time, if you take all the mRNA of a particular cell, alright, together all of it is called a transcriptome. Transcriptome. Like your genome is made up of all the genes in a particular cell, alright, your transcriptome is made up of all the transcripts in a particular cell. mRNA is also called transcripts, right, because they have been obtained from transcription of the genes. Alright.
Part of genes are expressed, they are called as.
If you take all of it together.
But you said that only some of it are expressed.
So the ones which are being expressed, if you take all of them, like when I say all, these all 10,000. Agar transcript, if you take only one transcript, it is a part of the transcriptome. If you take all the genes which are being expressed, like say 10,000, इस सब का अगर mRNA लिया तो together it's called the transcriptome. अगर सब genes को साथ में लिया, irrespective of whether they are being expressed or not expressed, it will be called the genome, right? So you know the difference between the genome and the transcriptome. Is a part of the transcriptome is a part of the genome which is being expressed, मतलब where the transcription is taking place and where your mRNA is being formed. That is your transcriptome. Alright, and all of these mRNA you will take, you will convert it into cDNA. Alright, what is cDNA? cDNA is nothing but, see, it's just named as complementary DNA, but these are DNA molecules only. So like your genomic library which we discussed before, then what you'll do is simply you'll take these, they are double stranded, alright. You'll take these fragments of cDNA, you'll convert it into appropriate fragments, alright, depending on what vector you're using. You'll put your cDNA fragments inside various vectors, then these vectors you'll put in your host, most of the cases is E. coli, and then you'll grow it in a plate and you'll make a library, right? This library will be called your cDNA library, genomic library and cDNA library. Okay, what is the difference? cDNA library contains only the transcriptome, and remember, a transcriptome is a subset of your genome. Alright, understood? cDNA library. There will be another important difference is, if you try to find a gene inside your genome, okay, it will have both introns and exons, right? But the genes which you will find in your cDNA library will only have exons, because the mRNA which you will take will be the mature mRNA in which splicing has occurred. Okay. Now if you talk about the use of the genomic library or your cDNA library, what are the uses? First of all, these are the libraries in which you are physically preserving a part. In case of genomic library, you are preserving the whole genome of a particular strain of a microbe or of a particular organism indefinitely. Preservation, alright. And supposedly, you know, if there is a particular gene which you want, okay, let's try and form an example. We already know a lot of tigers have become extinct, alright, and very few are already left. Okay, so supposingly there was a primitive ancestral tiger, okay, which was able to withstand high temperatures, okay, and it was being able to do this because of certain proteins which it had, or because of certain genes which are being expressed in that particular tiger. Alright, but now the tiger has become extinct to whatever reasons, but he had a special property that he could survive in higher temperatures. Alright, now you have certain tigers now which are, everything is good in them, but there is a problem that they cannot survive at higher temperatures. Alright, this is the hypothetical example. Alright, actually all of it is possible, but it is very difficult to do so because there are many genes involved. So supposedly you have breeded some tigers which are breeding well. The only problem is they are not resistant to high temperatures. Supposedly, though, okay, your first attempt will be that you actually preserve the tigers themselves, right? But supposedly due to some reasons they have become extinct, you are not able to preserve the tigers. Only if you have reserved the genome of that particular tiger. If you made a genomic library or a cDNA library out of the DNA which was present in those particular tigers, alright, there is a possibility, and you knew that there are certain genes which helps it to sustain at high temperatures. You could detect those genes inside their genomic libraries, take those genes, alright, and give those genes to these tigers, try and integrate in their genome. So once that has happened, these tigers then they can live at higher temperatures. Alright, you've genetically engineered your tigers which you're breeding to become resistant, to live better at higher temperatures. Why was this possible? Even those tigers are dead because you had made cDNA libraries and genomic libraries out of it. Just to give you an example, in case of animals to actually do this, it is very difficult, but this is very widely used in case of plants and in case of microbes.
we have gene libraries, why do we need
cDNA libraries?
Because it expresses only 10,000 of the genes. So all the genes might not be present in that.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, completely agree that all the genes might not be present in it, but there is an advantage. Advantage first, that the genes are present in the mature form. There are no introns present. Alright, and when I actually told you, that you wanted to find the genes which cause those particular tigers to live at high temperatures, if you want to find those genes out, it is very difficult to find them in the complete genome. Right, your genome is so huge. Imagine finding one gene out of 30,000 genes. 30,000 genes which you know, and there is so much of junk DNA which is present, and you don't know whether genes are present in them or not. It's very difficult to find a gene in that case, right? But if there is a cDNA library, though the number is small, there is a possibility that your particular gene was not expressed, but that possibility is much lesser than actually finding the gene in your cDNA library. Okay, and I have given you these numbers which I have given you are hypothetical. ऐसा नहीं कि 30,000 से 12,000 express होता है. It varies. Can be much higher. 30 से maybe up to 25,000 genes are being expressed. Only 5,000 are not being expressed. Right. So the probability of finding a gene inside your cDNA is much more easier than finding it in your genome, in the library, when you are finding the genes.
If you don't get a cDNA,
Then you have to go, but पहले अगर easier version present है तो why not try this? Okay. Again, I'll tell you, in cases of plants and microbes, genomic libraries are very useful, and the experiments which I told you, okay, they are called transgenic experiments, because you're taking gene from one organism and putting it in another organism. Transgenic experiments in which you're forming transgenic animals, transgenic plants, transgenic microbes. Alright. In case of microbes and plants, this is actually being done on a very large scale. In animals it is less successful because there are a lot of things about the animal cells itself which we've not understood till now. A lot of factors we've still not understood. It doesn't mean in plants and microbes we've understood more. Is this understood? Sure. There's one more thing to it.
cDNA library, we don't have introns.
Yeah, these are expressed genes, right? Once the genes is expressed and the splicing is occurred, inside the gene only exons will be present, no introns will be present. Okay, there are more things about the cDNA. Your reverse transcriptase enzyme is not a very efficient enzyme. So if the length of your DNA is so much, okay, many of the times what will happen, it will form a part of it and then it will abort. So you will actually get smaller fragments which are lesser than your actual gene, and even those will be present inside your cDNA. Alright, in various copies. In fact, the whole experiment which I told you, what they realized was, okay, there is so much of biodiversity. Let's say if we talk about plants, there are so many different plants available. Alright, a lot of them have different genes. Okay, we have not understood the importance of that gene right now. Okay, but maybe in future we might come to know that those particular genes are very important. Right now we don't know the exact function or the exact importance of the gene, but there is a possibility that it will be very important in the future. Okay, so many countries, even in India it has started, what they started doing is, जितनी भी plants है, different plant species, phylums, उन सब का DNA लो और उनकी libraries बना के रखो पहले से, irrespective whether it's a crop plant, whether you're actually getting something good out of it right now, or whether you're not getting good out of it right now. take most of these plants, in fact try and take all of these different kind of plants, make libraries out of it. Alright, in case in future we might require a particular gene with a particular trait, and by the time we actually go and search for it in the field, that plant might have become extinct, but it's okay, at least we'll have the genomic part of it. Okay, so it's called biodiversity preservation at the genetic level, at the DNA level. Mostly then in those cases you are making the genome library only, okay, you're not making a cDNA library, genome library. So for many of these plants, especially crop plants में कितनी varieties आते हैं, you know that, right? Take all of those varieties, irrespective whether they are good, bad, right now, whatever, just make a genomic library of that particular crop plant, species, strain levels, put it in the gene library and preserve it. There are centers, there are huge centers, there are centers in Chandigarh and in various other places which preserve the biodiversity by forming genomic libraries. Alright, it's a huge investment which the Indian government has taken. And even for animals it is started in some places. Understood? Any other doubts you have? Ma'am, how do you pause this? How do you pause it? This button? नीचे वाला?